Hello there and welcome. I'm Ole Brygger, and if you're new here, I really hope I'll earn your subscription today. I've had this complete set for a couple of months now, and I have been trying to use almost all of the paints. And in this video, we're going to have a look at all the effect paints from this box. There's 18 of them, and there's a couple I wouldn't categorize as effect paints, but I'll get back to that later. I also made a test sheet where I'm going to test all the effect paints over different kinds of primers. We have a gray, white and a black. And I 3D printed and prepared some miniatures to test some of the effect paints on. So we better get started. Okay, here's my test sheet, and we will start with the oil stain. I don't expect all these effect paints to make the best coverage, but it is not how these effect paints are intended. They are effect paints, and they are just an addition to the existing model. But let's see how the consistency is. And it is like pouring oil on this piece of paper. I will check back when everything is dry and see how it turns out. Let's check out this oozing vomit. The consistency is almost the same as the oil stain, but there's some tiny grains in it and it actually looks pretty disgusting. I've not tried this yet on a miniature, but we will do that later in this video. Yuck, it is actually looking like vomit. And I just can't wait to see how it turns out when this is dry. This is the war paint stabilizer, and it is actually not an effect paint. I wouldn't call this an effect paint because this is actually just a paint medium, like we had in the old war paint series. And it is just made for thinning down your paint, so it won't separate as easily as if you thin it down with water. And here I'll just test it with a piece of cardboard. And on to the next. This is the War Paint's Retarder. This is also a paint medium, but not only it will thin down the paint, it will also increase the dry time of the paint and give you a longer work time. Then you can use it for wet blending. I have not done very much of wet blending, and this is a skill I really need to improve. But I will still try to give it a shot here. Just a couple of drops of the Retarder into each paint drop, and then back to my white cardboard. I won't spend much time on this, but with a bit more patience, I think the result could turn out a bit better, but I think this is okay. And here we have the gloss varnish. Usually you wouldn't put this directly on primer, but I will still put it on my test sheet over the black, gray and white. We will get back to this later and test it out on some miniatures. And the same thing goes for the matte varnish. This is a bit more milky white, but I know when it dries up it will be totally clear and silky matte. But we will get back to this later and test it out on a couple of miniatures. This is the disgusting slime, and this is almost the same effect as the oozing vomit. This is just a more bright and vibrant green color, and it has a fluorescent effect, and there's no grains in this one. This is the dry blood. This is a very dark and deep red color. It will dry up very matte, and it has some sort of grains to it, so it really it has a crusty surface when it's dry. True blood is a bit more bright in the red tone, and it has a more glossy effect, and there's no grains in this one. It actually looks like real blood. Like if you cut your finger and wiped the blood off in a piece of paper. Dark rust is a very dark brown, and it is very opaque. It also has some grains in it, and it will dry up very matte. It really looks like some old rust. The fresh rust is more orange, and it will also dry up very matte. It has a very bright rusty tone to it, and it really looks like the tiny rust dots on your car's disc brakes if they were wet and you left them overnight. Verdigris. This is an effect color for oxidization of bronze and copper, and it will give it this green bluish tint to it, but actually it's almost like rust. This is just the way copper and bronze will react with oxygen and it will start to rust. And in a more fancy word, this is called oxidization. This is the brush-on primer. As I said earlier in this video, I don't think some of these paints would be considered as effect paints. I definitely wouldn't consider a primer an effect paint, but I guess the Army Painter didn't have another category for primers to put this one in. I never use brush-on primers, but I think the coverage of this one is pretty good. I usually prime my models with airbrush. And now to 5 very interesting colors. Plasma Coil Glow, the blue color. Data System Glow, which is the green color. Lens Flare Glow, which is yellow. Radiation Glow, a nice orange color. And finally the Magenta Power Node Glow. These are the fluorescent colors. They all work in the same way and just in different colors, and they will react with UV light. And make a note here, the disgusting slime also has a fluorescent effect. They are all translucent and they work best over white. But we will still test them out on the black, gray and of course the white color as well. I've prepared some models that was failed print, and as you can see here, this barrel is quite crooked. And this is just to test the oil stains. And this actually works pretty well. It looks like real oil is coming out of the barrel and it flows and runs down the side of it as real oil would do. But let's get back to it and see how it turns out when this is dry. And for the oozing vomit, I think this model was very suitable. This goblin has very bad stomach, or he ate something that his little stomach couldn't handle. I actually don't know what you call a thing like this, but I think it would look great if it had some disgusting slime on it. This looks really gross. Let's see how it looks when it's dry. On this dead body, I will use the dry blood and the true blood, just so you can tell the difference. Maybe I overdid it, but I think this person looks very dead to me. Let's test out the rust effects. I will test out the dark rust on one side and the fresh rust on the other side. And in one of the ends of the container, I will test both of them on top of each other. This vase was also in my pile of failed print. I glued it on a base and painted it with the true copper. And now we can test it with the Verdigris effect paint. This should give it an oxidized look, like it was an old copper vase. I will only paint one side of the vase so we can see the difference between raw copper and oxidized copper. This was just a sloppy paint job. You can see the paint strokes, but it will still give you an idea of how oxidized copper will look. This old prisoner here, he was actually not a failed print. This is something I'm going to use. And why not test it with the brush-on primer? I have actually never used brush-on primer before. In the old days I used rattle cans to prime all my miniatures, and today I am using my airbrush. Brush-on primer takes a bit longer to prime miniatures, and you have to make sure that you are in all areas. But this is a cheap way to prime miniatures, and if you're not painting that many miniatures, or it is also a nice thing to have in your travel kit, then brush-on primer is a very good idea. Let's get back to this skeleton prisoner later when the brush-on primer is dry. The only thing I specifically printed for this test is these lightsabers. And I think these 5 fluorescent colors would be very useful to make a lightsaber. Usually I don't do sci-fi stuff, but I love Star Wars, and why not make a lightsaber? And I think all of these 5 fluorescent colors is very effective. They work best on a white surface because they are pretty translucent. And even when you hit them with a UV light, they look awesome. And I think we can improve the effect even more with the gloss varnish. So let's put that on all the lightsabers. And I will test the matte varnish on the container. I'll only paint half of it, and here you can see it has this milky white, but when it dries up it will be totally clear. The gloss varnish on the lightsaber is now dry, and I think it looks pretty cool. It really improved the effect. It's a bit hard to see on video, but the matte varnish is on half of the right side of this container, and it has this silky matte look. Let's check out how the oil stain looks when it's dry. I really think it looks cool on this barrel. It's like it punctured and the oil just spilled out. Yeah, and the Goblin, he still has a bad stomach. I don't think I should have painted it over white, but maybe a brown or maybe yellowish orange base coat would have been more effective. And the disgusting slime on this thing, I think it turned out pretty cool. And it has an even more disgusting look under UV light. The dry blood and the true blood is also dry. I still think I overdid it a bit too much, but you still get an idea of how they work. The dark rust and the fresh rust is also pretty good. I think they give a very good effect of how they work, and even combined they will get even better. The Army Painter also have a rusty wash, and on top of that, that just looks awesome. The Verdigris on the vase just gives it a very nice and old and worn copper look. The brush-on primer dries up with a very smooth and matte look, and now this one here is ready to paint. This is pretty much it for now. I really hope this video gave you an idea of how all these effect paints work. I'm very excited about all of them because I think they are very useful in their own way. And I really love the lightsabers. It's just such a cool effect, and it has done it very easy to make lightsabers and other lightning effects. I'm not gonna use it for much sci-fi stuff because this is not what I do, but for magical effects and other stuff, I think this is pretty awesome. And all the other effect paints, I just love it. This is pretty much it for now. I really appreciate you all being here and watching this video to the end. And if you think I've earned it, please remember to hit that subscribe button and the notification thing that is hidden on the subscribe button. Maybe also leave a comment down below. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.